favourite colour?" The girl stopped crying and looked at her. It was too interesting a question to ignore. "Pink." Predictable, thought Agatha. Her daughters were going to like blue. "Well, that's lucky, because I've got a packet of Smarties in my bag and I don't like the pink ones. So if you eat that one tiny piece of broccoli, I'll give you all my pink Smarties." The girl looked stunned. "Really?" Agatha turned to Christian Donaldson, who she was relieved to see smiling. "Well, if that's okay with your dad." He laughed. What's a few Smarties amongst friends? Christian couldn't stand the girls who moved into his house to look after his children. He wondered what he looked like to this one. He wanted to explain that he was never usually at home at this time, that it was only as a result of a massive row he'd had with Ruth at the weekend. Something about his children and responsibility and the fact that she'd be sacked if she took another day, all which simply boiled down to how bloody brilliantly self-sacrificing she was and what a selfish shit he was. Besides, after a full day of childcare, he felt like his kids had flung him against a wall and he was too tired to think of anything to say. And where the fuck was Ruth anyway? The girl didn't want tea, but she did allow Betty to lead her into the part of the sitting room overrun by plastic toys. Christian pretended to busy himself in the kitchen, shifting piles of mess which Ruth would properly home later. Other people in this house always shrunk it for Christian. It became all it was in the eyes of guests. 2 small rooms knocked together at the front, and a kitchen unimaginatively extended into the side return. Overcrowded bedrooms and a space squeezed into the roof. It felt like a fat man who'd eaten too much at lunch, gout-ridden and uncomfortable. When he'd been fucking Sarah, they'd always met at her flat, for obvious reasons. But that had been worse. As he had lain on her creaking double bed, he would feel old and foolish, surrounded by posters for bands he didn't even recognise, stuck onto walls whose colour he knew hadn't been chosen by anyone who lived there. He would find himself perversely longing for the subtle shades and carefully crafted beauty of his own house. And what a trick for his mind to play, because he had so hated Ruth when she'd cried over builders running late or been more excited by the colour of a tile than the touch of his hand. There'd been a park bench, which had also reminded him of his wife during that time. Predictably, because don't all affairs need a park bench? He would sometimes meet Sarah there, and it had an inscription which read, "For Maud, who loved this park as much as I loved her." He imagined an old man, whittling the letters to make the words, tears on his gnarled face, a lifetime of good memories in his head. All of which, of course, was crap, because no one had good memories anymore, and the bench had no doubt been gouged by some council machine. Not that it would have been enough to stop him anyway. Ruth had always been so easy to fool, it had almost cancelled out the excitement, and this annoyance had spurred him on. He had always worked unpredictable hours, and his job in television had often led him far from home, so staying away overnight was commonplace in their marriage. More than anything, though, he felt vindicated. He told himself that Ruth had always smothered him, that she had repressed his true nature, that his real self was a fun-loving, carefree guy who had never wanted to be tied down, that ultimately someone like Sarah suited him far better. She probably hadn't, though, although he still felt muddled. Still found it hard to get any clarity around a situation that had descended into such stomach-churning detritus, it was hard to place any decent feelings. 2 women, pregnant at the same time, and yet only 1 child to show for it. One strange little boy who still, at the age of nearly 3, never ate, hardly spoke, and followed your movements like eyes staring out of a painting. Christian worried that Hal had absorbed his mother's misery in the womb, in the same way that some babies are born addicted to heroin. A key turned in his front door, and he realised that his hands had grown cold in the sink. Ruth was always going to be late, but she still felt like a naughty child. Christian wouldn't understand. She hadn't even got the necessary words to explain why she had always known she wouldn't leave the office at 6, but had arranged the interview for 7. Not that she'd been able to predict the rain, of course, which jammed the tube so you felt that you would suffocate even in the ticket hall. It unsettled her, the way the rain lashed at the city nowadays, the way clouds darkened so quickly and furiously without any warning. She couldn't remember it having been like that in her own childhood, and she fretted over what she would tell her children about the world they were growing into. She could tell the girl was there already, just as she could tell